I'd like to bring up a gentleman to add just a little bit more, take about 5 minutes, introduce an additional material that you could take home today, a book that will help you better understand the new way and the new wave of credit and how we should pay very close attention to our credit score. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, so by show of hands, how many of you know your credit score? So everyone. Right? Yeah. All right, by show of hands, how many of you know your wealth score? All right, okay, so we got to talk about that. So my name's Gabriel Brown. I've been in the credit solutions business for about 15 years. And I ran across a few challenges when I was trying to expand my credit. I got up to 816 credit score. And as Ms. Phillips said, my score went up and down between 816. I think the highest I've ever been was 845. I started from a 486 credit score. I had 49 negative notations. I lived really fast and hard. I was born and raised in the ghetto, so every time someone offered me something by way of credit, I said yes. The only protocols I had was how soon can I get the card and start using it. I wasn't worried about the 35% payment history rule, the 30% amount of use rule. I wasn't worried about any of the rules. I was worried about hearing the yes. And I got myself in trouble. I got about $200,000 or more in debt, about $242,000. I ran into a hiccup in my life. I had a beautiful young girl with my college sweetheart, and she decided to leave me and go off to pursue another relationship. And I was from a family where a man and his children, and they stay together forever. My father and my mother got together. My mother was 16 when my father met her, and my father died after 43 years of marriage. So I took a hard hit mentally and spiritually when my family left and moved in with another gentleman. I couldn't work, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do anything about it. And I lost my way. I didn't lose my mind, I lost my way. And so when I woke up out of that, my 2 cars were repossessed. I was evicted from my house. My 19 credit cards were in default. My 13 department store cards were in default. I had visited the emergency room on 3 occasions thinking I was having heart attacks. I was essentially just having anxiety attacks. I was moving from place to place, room to room, and leaving utilities behind that were following me on my credit report because they couldn't figure out where to mail the bill. And so essentially I ended up moving to Las Vegas to hide from my shame. And I started here with 49 negative notations. So I had to fix my credit. So after fixing my credit, I realized that I wanted to do more with my life. I wanted to leave something behind for my daughter. I didn't just want to have nice things anymore. I wanted to have legacy. And I believe that credit is for the establishment of debt. I believe the average individual is only looking to meet their needs with credit. They're looking to have a cushion with their income. So when I got past that and I realized that I could use my credit with an 800 score, everyone that I was talking to in my office said, I'm an investor, I'm a developer, a real estate investor, I'm a developer. I own multiple businesses. I started looking at my credit differently. And I started trying to maximize my credit to then leverage to be an investor to get passive income. I hit a wall, and I'm gonna speed up here. I hit a wall where I realized that even with an 800 credit score, banks were still giving me small limits. I was wondering how some people got really high limits, 50,000, 100,000, 75,000. So I started doing some research and keeping dossiers on the people that had the high limits and the people that had the low limits. And I found some nuances about credit that most people don't know. Before FICO was mainstream for the public to understand, banks told us that there was a score that they were using to determine our risk factor, but they didn't tell us where they got the score from or what the score was. And you would walk away from the bank confused, trying to figure out, well, what is this score, right? And so eventually the score became a challenge because so many people were being excluded out of the credit industry, out of the market. And of course, credit makes the world go round. Most of us think it's cash. Credit is king, not cash. All right, so there was a lawsuit filed and FICO had to reveal their algorithm or the characteristics of it. And that's where you got the FICO chart from. So now the banks were using this black box score for so many years to determine risk, and even if you had a good job, been there more than 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, you were paying your bills on time, this score still had a greater impact than the actual credit profile, right? So, when I discovered that, I started to recognize, here's Brad, who I sent to the same creditors, because we have a credit rebuilder component in our office that we use to help clients after we repair their credit. So I sent Brad over to the same bank with Brian. They both graduated from the same university, they both live in the same house, they both work at the same company, and they both been there the same amount of time, same inquiries, same everything. And I find that Brad got a $500 limit, and Brian got a $1,500 limit. Who in the room can tell me why there was a difference between Brian's approval and Brad's approval? Same age, graduated from the same high school, college, live in the same house, work at the same employer. Why does one have a higher limit than the other?
But are they related?
Nope, they're just friends. I'll tell you why. Because just as when FICO was a company that was keeping dossiers, consumer data about you, and selling it to the bank, and the bank would use it as a determinant of risk based on giving you a loan. When the FICO was found out, the bank didn't stop using that tactic. They went underground, they went deeper. All right? And they created consumer files. Okay, so there's a difference between a consumer report, a credit report, and a consumer file. Okay, so let's talk about that. A credit report is when you're applying for credit, right? And you don't even get that. If you apply for credit, the mortgage professional will not give you your report. The auto dealer will not give you your report. The realtor will not give you a report. They'll tell you, oh, no, we can't give it to you. We can show it to you, but we can't give it to you, right? So the credit report doesn't belong to you. They'll tell you go to the bureaus and get it, right? So that's a credit report. Then there's a consumer report. A consumer report is when you want to review your report for yourself and you get it from the credit bureaus. You don't get that from a creditor, right? But the consumer file is what's most important because that's what FICO was. It was a consumer file. It was data that was gathered about you from exclusive places that you didn't know about. And so now I've discovered those consumer files. Okay, so I figured out why Brad got a $500 and why Brian got a $1,500 approval. Because you ever noticed on a credit app, they ask you for your mother's maiden name?
Yes.
Why they ask for your mother's maiden name? What does your mother have to do with this?
There's a background, a history.
Yes, because if your mother, I'm sorry to say this, if your mother was poor, right? And you happen to sneak away from the area that you used to live in,
Absolutely.
and now you're out here in Las Vegas, we want to know where you came from, not just because you moved around or not, we want to know where your family's from. So we ask you about your mother's maiden name. Then what we do is we check the demographic to where your mother lives through our research, our scraping of data. And we find out that your mother lived in a zip code in your town that LexisNexis told us from the Accurate report had a crime rate of 47%, had an average education of a 9th grader, right? The blocks of houses in that zip code were all less than 30,000, right? So now we know some factors about the potential that you have to make money in your life. Fruit doesn't fall too far from the tree, right? And then we use the zip code to where you currently live. We check the crime rate in that area, in that zip code through LexisNexis. We check the education level in that zip code through LexisNexis, all right? And now we have these factors. We found out Brad's mama's name was from the ghetto, And Brian's mama's name was from a suburban area. Brad's last address through LexisNexis had a higher crime rate, a higher education rate, and a higher value on houses in that area. So I may have mixed the names, but this is how we figured out who got the highest approval. So I said, okay, so I figured this out. So now, I'm gonna wrap it up. So now, where do you find the consumer reports if they're hiding them from you? I'm gonna give you a secret I never told anyone else. This is the first time I've done a talk in a public environment about this, and I'm passionate about it. I don't need a PowerPoint. I'm a living word right now. Yeah, so, how did I find these? Well, I'm doing credit repair the old-fashioned way. I'm still pressing palms and meeting belly to belly, as Ms. Phillips says. And I'm still getting credit consumer reports, which is the entire file. I'm almost done. I'm looking at the reports of Brad and Brian, and I'm going from page to page. There's a part of the report that we most overlook. It's called promotional inquiries. They say these are soft inquiries. No one knows on the credit report that occurred. And because we're doing online disputing, no one sees reports anymore because everything is digital, and we're in this millennial age where we don't need hard paper. I was at an event the other day, I handed some young kids my business card. They took a picture of the card and gave it back to me.
Yes, you did. That's the era we live in.
I was offended. I said, this is a $4 card. He didn't want it. He didn't want it. He took a picture of it and gave it back to me. And before you know it, everybody was handing me my card back. So I just put it in my pocket and I said, hey, just take a picture of my card. I learned quick. So what I figured out was the promotional inquiries. First I was chasing hard inquiries to see who was approving. Well, let me tell you, the promotional inquiries are the area, or is the area where banks are shopping you.
Yes, they are.
They already like you, because you fell into a group where the bank bought a batch of data from the credit bureau fitting their underwriting guidelines. We need a guy with 3 years of work history, makes about $50,000 with a score no lower than 650. The bank sells a batch of these names, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, right? And then that becomes a soft inquiry because the credit bureau has to tell the bank, has to tell you that the bank did a soft inquiry and bought information from you, right? But this is also where you find the consumer files that are being created, and this data is being scraped about you. So now, I find a consumer file called SageStream. I find a consumer file called Advanced Resolution Solutions. I find a consumer file called Innovis, all right? And this was before they became credit bureaus. They were consumer files that banks were using privately. So guess what? I'm gonna wrap it up, I swear. There's a consumer file that's so impactful to you getting approved for big money, that is scary. Did you know that the credit bureaus own payroll companies? Yeah, they own payroll companies. So when you apply and you say you make this amount, they have a payroll company arm that they buy your real-time paycheck from the last 2 weeks. You remember when? Yeah. You remember Miss Candace said, if you make a move, we're gonna find out. We'll know. We'll know. She didn't say how we know, but she said we will know. So how are you making moves that Miss Candace know about that ain't on your credit report? Right? Have you ever applied for something recently? They don't even want your social? Nope. Just give us your name and your address. Well, what are you gonna do with that? Don't worry about it. Well, we know all we need to know from that. So okay, here we are. So now they're buying this information. Credit bureaus have rental bureaus. They can tell where you live, right? All right, they have payroll companies, but this is the one that matters. I'm done. This is the one you're gonna wanna hear. These creditors now can pull your banking activity and tell you exactly how many deposits, debits, credits you've done in real time. And they consult this information unbeknownst to you. I found the reports. I wrote a book called The Wealth Score Expert. The new score is the Wealth Score. It's not about credit reports anymore. We're in a data-driven age where it's granular. A credit report is too great. Too many people have been involved, too many signatures, potential lawsuits. If you don't keep the information on file for X amount of years, all the red tape. A consumer file, I can consult it and never even tell you. It's like me going to your Facebook and not telling you I was there. That's how powerful the wealth score is. So I found this report where all the banks were, I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get the $50,000 limits, the $100,000 limits. So I find this obscure report, and it had all of my banking history for 36 months, and all of the banks that I was applying with were requesting this report. And because I wasn't keeping any money in that account, it was a credit union account that I could get great car loans and stuff with, I wasn't keeping any money in the account. But that was the account they were consulting, not the accounts where I keep the money.
Right.
So when I found out who was using it, I froze that report. And guess what? Now my limits are higher. So guess what I started doing? Freezing all of the reports. Safe Rent, Check Systems, LexisNexis, Innovis, Advanced Resolution Solutions. All of these
Well, that's why you need the book.
exotic reports. But I didn't put them in the book. I just gave you a snapshot of the book.
I have them in my book.
Yeah, okay. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. If you're trying to get more money, you gotta go to the granular reports. And there's so many out there, it's scary. But the ones that I found, 77 of them are the ones that the banks use. I know which banks use which ones, okay? All right, thank you for your time.
So I have a question, so how do we consult with you? You know, for the folks in the room, I'd like to know, you know, for those that know they're getting ready to purchase homes and
Right.
they know that they need to fix their credit,
Right.
how do we consult with you about these granular reports?
Okay, I have a website called wealthscores.com. Wealthscores.com. Okay, and you can go there and I give you an overview of some of the reports. I talk to you about the services I offer, what the services cost. At certain levels of the service, you get free credit repair. But you know, these types of reports typically don't affect a mortgage application or process. These reports affect when you're trying to borrow money for legacy, not liabilities. When you're trying to get a line of credit and the bank, you look good with a 70-80 credit score, you've been on the job 13 years, but you can't get any money to buy a hair salon or a barber shop or a car wash. And you're like, why do I have a good credit score and I can't borrow money? But Sally can, but
Yes.
I can't. So to block those consumer files from telling your history, too much of your history of, you know, of the poverty. And yeah, I'm sorry, this is true. Banks don't want to loan money to people that typically don't pay back. Right? Okay? Yeah, I'm being honest with you. And guess what's the next thing? I would do the same. When I look at you, if you ask me, can I borrow $100? I'm sizing you up. Your shoes, your suit, you know, your teeth, you know, I'm looking at your eyes. I need to know. I'm giving you $100, right? Banks do the same thing. Now let me tell you something else. Be very careful what you put on social media. Banks are looking at your social media, and if you're up there acting the fool, underwriters are looking at this and like, what in the world? I mean, not underwriters for mortgages and things like that, but I'm talking about for lines of credit. All right, so you can invest. That's character. What are the 5 C's of borrowing money? Character is one of them. And if you're on there drinking and acting a fool, it's not gonna happen. So I teach all this, okay? I'm sorry, I took more than 5 minutes.
That's awesome.
All right.